Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is not only my game of the year with no competition anywhere near the horizon, but is easily within the top 3 games I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. And let me tell you, it isn't number 2. That's a big statement, I know, but I truly feel it deep to my core, and if you've played through the entire game and don't feel somewhat similar, you might have to rethink your criteria of what a good game is. Normally, I'd say that if you don't like it, that's your preference and do what you want, but no, this game is great, and if you don't agree, you are just straight up wrong. I really want you to understand the impact that this story has left on me, and so luckily, I typed up my immediate, spoiler-free reaction to the ending during the credits, which I'll read now. I'm going to go a step further now that I've finished the game. Not only is Clair Obscur easily my pick for Game of the Year, it's just as easily within the top 3 greatest games I've ever played. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is by far the most emotionally invested I have ever been in a story, and said story is one of the most moving I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing throughout any form of media. This game is beautiful in every sense of the word, and is the pinnacle of gaming as an art form so far. I'm glad that the developers are getting the attention they so obviously deserve. So yeah, very few games have left this kind of an impact on me, and fewer still have had me planning to get a quote from them tattooed, but here we are. Clair Obscur is just one of those games that you can tell is going to stick with you for a long time. There's endless discussion to be had around the core themes, characters, plot points, the world, and especially around the ending. I honestly can't get enough of talking and hearing about this game. Everyone you talk to about this game has their own unique perspective about the world that's presented to them, and they seem to be all open to discussion. That being said, if you've played the game and you want to discuss, my comment section and Discord are always open. Just be careful about going down there if you haven't finished the main story. If that's all you need to be convinced to play Expedition 33, be warned, because there are spoilers for the entire main story in this video, so please click off and go play the game as soon as you can. It's one of the shortest turn-based RPGs I've ever played, and if you pick a general strategy and stay consistent in using upgrades and skills that make that strategy stronger, the game isn't all that difficult. I personally mainlined the story, and I finished it in a single weekend. If you're able to, please buy it so you can support the developers, but if you can't, it's on Game Pass. If you've ever enjoyed a turn-based RPG or a heartfelt story, you owe it to yourself to experience this game. I literally give it as strong of a recommendation as I possibly can. So with that out of the way, how did a game studio formed from 3 friends who built themselves up as they went create perhaps the strongest emotional experience I've ever had with a piece of media? Stick with me and let's find out. I first heard of Clair Obscur when it was initially announced in the summer of 2024. At the time, I never saw the full trailer, only a short gameplay demo, and so I had no idea what any of it was about. I knew so little that, upon seeing a few screenshots from the trailer, I thought it was an Atlas RPG because of the stylish UI and exactly nothing else. That's how not on my radar this game was at first. At the time, I just took a screenshot of a YouTube ad and put it on my how long to beat wishlist and moved on with my life. From then until the game's release, I didn't hear a peep about it. So when reviews came out, and within days it had become one of the best reviewed games of all time, I was caught pretty off guard. If you're active in the online gaming space, you couldn't not hear about how well this game was reviewing in that first week. All of my social media feeds were filled with raving fans and the heartfelt reaction from the development team, which just always makes you feel good when you read their responses. I personally dove headfirst into the Yakuza franchise in March, and I had just started the 6th game when Clair Obscur released. I personally intended to put off playing the game until I had finished the series, but to my friend's enthusiastic suggestion, I put it down and picked up Clair Obscur, and I didn't put it back down until I had finished the entire main story in just 3 sittings. Now that may sound like I rushed through, but in reality the main story really is that short, and the game is balanced around you mainlining the story. And also, despite its short runtime, I'm confident in saying that I was far more emotionally invested in Clair Obscur than I have been in any other game from the first hour right up until the last. When you first begin Clair Obscur, you take control of the soon-to-be oldest man in Lumière, the 32-year-old Gustave. When we first meet him, he's toiling over what he'll say to his ex-girlfriend Sophie, as today is the day of her gommage. Can you tell that the devs are French yet? Years ago, there was an event called The Fracture, where the part of Lumière that our characters reside in was blown apart from the rest of the continent and encased in some sort of shield bubble. On the other side of the continent, in view of the docks, there is a monolith with a number painted on it, currently reading 34. Every year, the giant creature that sits in front of the monolith, known as the Paintress, stands up and lowers the number by 1. As she does this, everyone who is currently the age of the new number gommages, or fades away in a stream of roses, dying. Nobody knows how or why the Paintress does what she does. They simply accept that that's the world they live in. Around when the monolith says 84, that's when the effects of the gommage really start to become obvious. At that point, they started sending expeditions out to the continent. Later, these would become comprised of those who had just 1 year left. Their intention was to kill the Paintress and stop the gommage to restore the natural lifespans to the people of Lumière. Where we pick up, it's mere minutes before the end of Monolith Year 34, and to date, not a single member from an expedition has so much as returned. Gustave follows his adoptive little sister Maëlle to the festival that's intended to celebrate the lives of those about to experience their gommage. Maëlle encourages him to speak to the 33-year-old Sophie. Better late than never, I guess. I mentioned it in passing, but once this year's gommage takes place, Gustave will become the oldest man in Lumière, and as such, he will be the leader of this year's expedition. The gommage is one of the most beautiful scenes in the entire game, and that's the thing that first clued me into how special this game is. Even if you do everything there is in the festival, this is still under an hour after you've booted up the game. Gustave holds his now rekindled love close, and as the monolith year changes to 33, those around them begin to wither away one by one. If you go into the game blind, unlike me, this scene will impact you far more, because up until this point, there's no hint as to what the gommage actually is. But regardless of your spoiler status, the scene is beautiful. The visual and sound direction of the scene are just absolutely stunning. The game overall is drop-dead gorgeous. The most impressive part about this scene is how wordlessly it conveys the beauty and complex horror that such a moment invokes in one of the most powerful cutscenes ever produced. The part that truly breaks me every time I rewatch it is how they include multiple shots of parents with their children as they pass away. Particularly, there's one shot of a child holding their mother's hand in the moment that her mother fades away. This game had me shedding tears within the opening hour, and it had me fired up to go questing to defeat the Paintress. Gustave reassures Sophie that he's here for her, holding her in his arms in her final moment. As she passes away, leaving a broken, grieving Gustave to attend the after-party for the expedition's send-off. A few tutorials and character events are had at this party, particularly introducing you to the various members of the expedition, who we'll speak about as they become relevant later on. Gustave's sister is rightfully upset that Maëlle is coming along with this year's expedition, given that nobody's ever returned. But mainly because Maëlle is only 16 years old, so she views it as Maëlle throwing away the precious few years she has left. Maëlle, of course, being 16 years old, isn't listening to her older sister, and is resolved to truly live her life rather than wasting it away doing nothing in Lumière. And with that, Expedition 33 leaves Lumière in search of the Paintress. Soon after leaving, they dock their ship into a dark beach. They quickly survey the area to get a feel for the land, but before they can even look around and truly start their expedition, before all of them are even off the boat, an old man appears. Strictly according to the rules of Clair Obscur's world that we and the characters are aware of, this isn't possible. As stated by the developer team on Twitter, anyone who has some idiosyncrasy that would have their age and the monolith clock never be the same number would just pass away the next year after they narrowly avoided it. That being said, there is no loophole in the system for someone to live more than 1 year above the number on the monolith, which currently reads 33. Yet the man before them is old, wrinkled, he has graying hair, he walks with a cane, and, while we're at it, he's somehow still alive despite no expedition ever sending word or personally returning to Lumière. The characters estimate that he's in his 50s, or maybe even his 60s. How could someone possibly survive this long given the world they live in? Given what they and the player knows, it's just not possible. Of course, all this thought comes later, given there's no time to consider the implications of his age before he begins eviscerating the expedition. Chaos erupts, named characters are killed, Gustave is almost immediately alone, and a horrifying creature appears and attacks him, turning the screen black as he loses consciousness. This scene is jarring on a first playthrough. Within a matter of seconds, almost every member of the expedition is killed on screen, and we don't have confirmation that anyone other than Gustave has survived. Most of these characters were named, they had personalities, you spoke with them at the going away party, you kind of assumed that they would be with you for, if not all of the journey, then at least some of it. For now, we can safely assume that Gustave has survived, since he's our protagonist, and therefore he must make it to the end of the game. This is quickly confirmed when he wakes up farther in the island, and the game truly begins. Gustave continues running through the island, encountering brutal Nevrons along the way. I'm still not personally clear on the exact definition of a Nevron. What I do know is that they're some sort of living amalgamations of rock and metal that are dead set on killing any humans they come across. There are a few unpainted Nevrons that you can communicate with, and early on, one of them reveals that they were created by the Paintress, which goes to show what they mean when they call themselves unpainted. Not long after the scene on the beach, there's another immensely powerful moment. Gustave is still alone, not sure if anyone else survived the beach. In his aimless venture for an ally, he comes across a room piled up to the walls with dead expeditioners. It's important to note that in Lumière, no matter how someone dies, from the gommage or some other external factor, they fade away into rose petals all the same. So when Gustave sees this pile of familiar corpses, it's his first time seeing a dead body. As it turns out, when killed by a Nevron, the chroma that allows the expeditioners to summon weapons from thin air and use elemental magic stays trapped within their bodies, and they solidify into a rock-like substance. Upon seeing this scene, Gustave comes to a horrifying realization. Not only have all the expeditions been for naught, there's no hope of ever defeating the Paintress. This whole time, they've simply been sending sacrifices to this meat grinder of a continent. He wordlessly falls to the ground, manifests his gun, and holds it to his head. He festers within his mind for a moment before his existential stupor is interrupted by Lune, the first survivor he's seen so far. She simply says, "If you do that, we both die." Lune snaps Gustave out of it, and they continue exploring the island together. Lune reminding Gustave of one motto the expeditioners share: "When one falls, we continue. Not if, when." From here they continue exploring the landmass that they arrived on, finding two other expeditioners who survived the scene at the beach, Maël and Ciel. They find Ciel as the champion of the Gestural Arena, Gestrals being the race of the vast majority of NPCs you'll find on the continent. They love fighting, and most dialogue with them makes me burst out laughing. When they first find Maël, they enter this ethereal manor that exists within some sort of pocket dimension. It's really hard to get a read on what exactly is happening at this point, but you get a really uncomfortable feeling from the whole area. Especially when you see that Maël is being shadowed by a creature known only as the Curator. It looks to be made of rock, with a caved-in face. It has an incredibly unsettling presence. Even the camera seems to be afraid of it. Despite its aura, it seems to have latched onto Maël, and so it follows you back to camp when she joins you to upgrade your weapons and your expedition supplies. Now, with all of the surviving expeditioners in tow, they carry on, recruiting an ancient creature known as Esquier, who acts as their mount. He'll be able to swim them across to new islands, provided they go ahead and find a special rock that unlocks that ability for him, so they set off with that exact goal in mind. On the way, Maëlle and Gustave have a casual heart-to-heart that really solidified the reality of living under these conditions, and goes to show off one of the best aspects of this game. Throughout the whole story up to this point, Maëlle calls Gustave an old man. It never really stuck out to me because I'm used to anyone on the internet calling people over 20 ancient, but in this moment, as they look across the ocean at the paintress, Gustave replies to her, saying, "You know, there used to be a time when people lived past 30, and she doesn't believe him. Genuinely. I mean, Maëlle cannot even imagine people living their natural lifespans. It's just totally foreign to her. She's 16 years old and past middle age. I mean, it's horrific, deeply saddening, and it's real. It puts you in the mindset of how one might think growing up in a world like this. Given the year that she was born, Maëlle's only ever going to live to 25 if she's lucky, and she made the decision that she'd just rather die now, seeing the world, than live a few more dull years in Lumière and risk dying before she can go out on her own expedition. That's all she has in life. These are just the kinds of things you have to think about with the gommage on the horizon, and from a parent's perspective, it's no easier. Later on, towards the end of the game, Ciel opens up about how much she loves her children, and in one of the most impactful gut punches of the whole script, she says that the kindest thing she can do for her children is not to have them. These characters feel like real people who grew up in and know nothing other than this world, as opposed to a lot of other games which do have characters feel like real people, but they constantly explain to each other what living in their world is like. Clair Obscur doesn't do that. Which brings me to one of the best parts about Clair Obscur, the dialogue. The dialogue of this game is written in such a mature and real way, to the point where it brings to light how childish some dialogue can sound in other games. These characters feel like people who have lived in this world their entire life. They don't explain basic details to the audience because they have no reason to do that. What is a gommage? What's the definition of a Nevron? What exactly is chroma? Keep playing, let the information presented simmer, and figure it out yourself once they give you all the puzzle pieces. Giving audiences an exact definition for all your new fantasy terms isn't worth destroying the realism of the script and ripping the player out of the story. Everybody who speaks to each other about any of these concepts that are foreign to us has grown up in a world where they're commonplace. These characters all know these definitions. Why would they ever take the time to explain it? It's genius, it's confident, and it actually respects the audience intelligence in a way I very rarely see from games. And while we're talking about the dialogue, there's another aspect to the way it's written that I love just as much, and it kind of builds on the same premise. There are multiple scenes where two characters are talking about something, and both the main party and the player doesn't know what they're talking about. In these scenes, the characters don't mince words, they don't speak broadly, they don't repeat basic information they both know by heart for the sake of letting the player understand. They speak like people who know something you don't and are in no way trying to hide it. I'll point out some examples as they come, but in Clair Obscur, the writers are not afraid to let you be confused. They trust that you'll be interested enough to keep playing the game and figure it out when it's time. They give you all the information you need to come to a conclusion well before they spell it out for you. It sounds like such a simple thing, but I genuinely can't point to another scene in any game, movie, or TV show structured like this. At the very least, I don't think I've ever seen one done this well. 9 times out of 10, if two characters are talking about a new concept and the viewer doesn't know what they're talking about yet, they'll say obvious, basic information they both should be well aware of so that the viewer can get an idea of what they're talking about. But Clair Obscur trusts the player's power of reasoning and that they'll be interested enough to figure it out when it's time. The script prioritizes realistic dialogue over everything else, and the creators were confident enough to allow the players to be confused. This, better than anything I've ever seen before, truly puts you in the same position narratively as the expedition at every turn. Through a hard-fought battle, the party finally acquires Esquia's rock, meaning now he can carry them across water, putting them one step closer to the Paintress since their boat was previously destroyed. After acquiring the rock, the party jumps down one by one from the cliff where the battle took place and lands upon Esquia. Stalling for a moment, Gustave and Maël stay behind to speak about and unpack the situation they have found themselves in. The continent, the Gestrels, Esquia, they've been through unimaginable hardship, but they've seen incredible things that were thought to be only legend, and they got through it together. It's a beautiful moment of reflection and the first substantial amount of hope we've seen since the beach. And speaking of the beach, it all comes crashing down in a second as Gustave's heart is pierced by the old man. Gustave puts up a barrier to protect Maël. Hours before, they promised each other that they'd run away if he ever approached, that they'd save themselves. But Gustave just can't bring himself to do it. He resolves to keep Maël safe and stands tall as he faces off against the old man. The game lets you control Gustave during this fight, and it's very immediately apparent that while your attacks are definitely harming him, it's not going to be anywhere near enough to take him down. Transitioning back to a cutscene, Gustave understands the futility of fighting this force of nature, and he accepts his role in this story. He turns to Maël and utters his final for those who come after as he charges into battle one final time. He raises his sword to strike the old man before he shoots a beam of energy through his chest, and Gustave falls to the floor. There's no fake out here. In this moment, they actually kill off the main character. Not only can you not play as Gustave for the rest of the story, but even during the post-game, he's totally not available. The only way to play as Gustave is to restart the game and not progress past this cutscene trigger. Personally, I thought his unique ability was just a little simple, so I thought he would get some new ability later in the game. I had no idea they were just gonna up and kill him and then try to replace him as the main character, which is a ballsy, realistic, and frankly genius move. Speaking of his replacement, a new character shows up, known as Verso. He raises his weapon to protect Maël from the old man, and given their dialogue, it's immediately obvious that they know each other. This leads into one of those conversations I mentioned earlier where they don't pull punches and fully leave you confused as to what in the world these two are talking about. They mention the family, something Verso did. It's enough to paint a vague picture, but it creates more questions than answers. It's pretty clear that Verso and this old man are related. They look like the same person at different points in their lives, and also that Verso has done something this old man considers a betrayal. But why are they both older than 33? How come Verso steps in to protect Maël? Well, is he standing there the whole time? If so, how come he only stepped in after Gustave died? Did he think Gustave could defeat the old man? If so, why would he want his father dead? If not, why would he want Gustave dead? We're not getting any answers yet, since as soon as Verso steps in, the old man, who Verso reveals is named Renoir, stands down and allows the expedition to escape. And so ends Act 1. I'd like to take this moment to talk a little bit about the production of Expedition 33. The studio, Sandfall Interactive, was formed alongside the idea of Clair Obscur by Guillaume Broche, who began working on it on the side given how bored he was while working at Ubisoft, which is the least surprising thing I've ever learned. He teamed up with Tom Gillerman and Francois Marousse, and the three began soon working on the game full-time. They officially formed the studio Sandfall Interactive once the three had met and began working on the game full-time. As they continued working on the project, they would hire on developers, visual artists, writers, and whoever they would need at the time, basically having an open ad hiring on an as-needed basis, where they would hire on whatever role they needed for the next piece of the game to be finished. Development originally began in 2020, meaning the entire game had a 5-year development window. A lot of people might consider this a little excessive for a turn-based RPG, but that's because they're comparing it to large companies who not only have deep pockets, but who started the game with an entire team and with every role filled. This doesn't even consider the fact that they had to literally create a company at the same time as the game. For a studio of this size, formed out of their basements with barely enough backing at the start to get by, it is a monumental achievement that the game released at all, and even more impressive that the audio and visual presentation is top of the industry level stunning. It's also one of the most mechanically interesting takes on the genre that's ever been made. Speaking on the audio quality, the original soundtrack of Clair Obscur was composed almost entirely by Lorien Testard. If you're not aware, his previous work was done completely independently, and it was posted on SoundCloud. This is genuinely one of the most emotionally moving soundtracks I've ever had the pleasure of listening to. Every song perfectly fits and uplifts the scene that it's in. And don't even get me started on the battle tracks. They're perfectly written to get you excited for combat. Please do yourself a favor and listen to Monaco's boss theme and also the title track, Clair Obscur. They're both incredible songs, and the main theme is used perfectly throughout the game. To my knowledge, this is Lorien Testard's first time composing a soundtrack at all, or working on music in any professional sense. So the fact that he totally hit it out of the park this well is all the more impressive. One of the biggest strengths that Clair Obscur has going for it is the cast. How they managed to get such insanely talented actors to be a part of this game, I'll never know, but oh my god, I am so glad that they did. They managed to perfectly cast each character, and all of their actors are firing on all cylinders. Gustave is voiced by Charlie Cox of MCU Daredevil fame. Verso is Ben Starr, who plays the Balatro mascot Jimbo, and his slightly lesser-known role, Clive Rossfield, the best Final Fantasy main character. Mael is Jennifer English, who voiced Shadowheart in Baldur's Gate 3, and Renoir is voiced by Andy Serkis. None of them hold back, and the script is perfectly tailored to give each of them the chance to give their all. Their performances are what really sell this story and the stakes of Clair Obscur. Very few games have such consistently fantastic character acting. And this, paired alongside the beautifully crafted music of Lorien Testard and deeply human dialogue the team put together, perfectly makes these characters feel like real people. It makes them feel like they're reacting to the world in such a real way, to this traumatic expedition and to all of the trials that still lay before them. Picking back up with Act 2, we have another moment that puts into perspective what life is like for someone living in Lumière. When getting to know the party, Verso brings up that he was there for the fracture. He set off originally as a part of the very first expedition, intent on finding survivors. He reveals that he and Renoir have some sort of link to the Paintress that makes them immortal, and killing her would allow them to die. Which makes sense why Renoir doesn't want the expeditions to make it to her, and why Verso does. Verso talks as if he's this immortal creature who's lived far too long and seen too many things, but when asked about his age, he repeatedly confirms that he's almost exactly 100 years old. 100 years old. People in the real world live that long, but the value of time is so distorted for people who live with the Gommage that these ages are viewed in an entirely different context, and 100 is seen as ancient history. The expedition continues, and they find themselves in Old Lumière, the remains of where Lumière used to stand before the fracture. They came in search of the Paintress's heart. Presently, the only thing stopping them from entering the monolith and confronting the Paintress herself is a barrier that blocks her island off from the mainland. If they manage to destroy her heart, the barrier will fade away, and they can go end the expedition. Deep within this broken town, they see the ethereal manor where they first found Mael. Up to this point, they've found doors that lead to the inside through some strange pocket dimension littered around the continent. This is the first time we've seen the outside of it. Verso reveals that the Paintress's heart is inside, but once again, Renoir stops us in our tracks. This time, we're stronger, and he can't wipe us out as easily as he could on the beach. Our journey may have been harsh, but it strengthened us enough to stand and fight. Although we can't defeat him just yet, we push him back for now, and for the first time, everyone survives an encounter with Renoir. After the fight, Renoir chastises Verso for standing against him, revealing officially that Verso is in fact his son, confirming why both of them are linked in their immortality. After this, he disappears, taking the manor and the paintress's heart with him. The party feels betrayed by Verso, as he never told them that he and Renoir were related. But he makes a good point of saying it's frankly none of their business and doesn't change anything. So they get over it remarkably quickly and continue on. Their next goal is to defeat 2 of the 3 Axons, Axons being infinitely more powerful creatures than Nevrons. The chroma received from their cores will be used by the Curator to create a weapon that can pierce the barrier blocking the monolith off from the rest of the world. Seeing as they can't access the Paintress's heart to destroy it anymore, this is their only option. Finally, through countless trials and life-or-death battles, the expedition arrives at the foot of the monolith. As they ascend, they're once again confronted by Renoir. But after having defeated the Axons, they've grown formidable. And through a tough boss fight, they stand victorious. Finally, fairly defeating him in combat. After Renoir is defeated, the Curator appears. Maël looks at him, and they both share a quiet understanding. The Curator takes Maël's hand and places it on Renoir. Through some power that the Curator either grants or unlocks within Maël, it's not exactly sure for now, she manages to bypass Renoir's immortality, killing him for good, and letting off the same effect as the gommage. The expedition looks at each other and comes to a quiet understanding. This is the power that'll allow them to kill the Paintress. This is how they're going to end things. They ascend to the top of the monolith. As the expedition climbs the mountain, they see different scenes from the Paintress's life play out before them. Some of these moments include Renoir and the Paintress side by side. One of the final memories show them standing beside each other with a baby in hand. Nobody says it, but the implication is clear. Renoir was the Paintress's husband, making Verso her son. Although the exact mechanism of the three's immortality is unclear, this piece of information solidifies their connection, and confirms that since Maël could kill Renoir, she could absolutely do in the Paintress. Once you reach the top, they stand face to face with the Paintress, and she's not quite what you'd expect. They see a regularly sized creature with the same features as the Curator. Cracked stone body with floating hair and a caved-in face showing a black void within. A far cry size-wise from the giant being of the same shape that currently rests at the entrance of the monolith. Upon noticing Verso, she spouts off in this confusing monologue before the battle begins. As you begin fighting her, she speaks about Renoir putting Verso up to this, and using him in some way. None of it makes any sense. The expedition holds their ground and push her back. She floats up and takes control of the giant Paintress from below and poises to attack. Verso takes a rock from his pocket and hands it to Esquier, which allows him to carry the party up to the sky. They fly up and continue the battle. Inch by inch, the group chips away at her health until you reach her third phase, where she's nothing but a broken, defeated deity. All she can do in this final phase is heal and buff your party until you put her out of her misery. And once you do, you've completed the expedition's goal and defeated the Paintress. Maël puts her hand with the Curator's like she did with Renoir and holds it out to the Paintress, causing her to gommage. As she fades away, the monolith's numbers disappear too, meaning, with the Paintress's defeat, the gommage has been stopped, and everyone should have their natural lifespan returned. They plant the flag of Expedition 33 atop the monolith to mark the end of the expeditions and head home to Lumière. Upon their return, they're celebrated as heroes. They've tripled, maybe quadrupled the amount of life that some of these people have left to live. It's an unimaginable joy as the entirety of Lumière celebrates their final expedition, Expedition 33. Somehow, though, among all of this, the cutscene manages to make you feel uneasy. Before confronting the Paintress, the party noticed that Minoko was unusually quiet, same with Verso. This somber quiet follows them as they return to Lumière. I mean, this should be a joyous moment for the both of them, but for some unknown reason, they're sulking alone. But, as the celebration continues, it finally happens. A pulse of energy shoots out in a sphere from the monolith, expanding to cover the entire world, and as it reaches Lumière, the entire population, party and all, die. Following this, you play an epilogue, 16 years prior. You play as a girl named Alicia, covered in burn scars, as she explores the manor that you visited in those strange pocket dimensions. The manor that Verso said housed the paintress's heart. As you explore, you see wings of the house blocked off due to fire damage, assumingly the same fire that scarred Alicia. Exploring further reveals family portraits, depicting some characters who we knew already were related, and some that we've never seen before. She enters a room full of paintings, and her parents are seemingly frozen in time in front of the same painting. Her older sister explains that they've been fighting within the painting for 2 weeks, and they risk dying if they stay within it for too long. So, Alicia enters the painting to try and bring her parents back to the real world. She tries to enter directly, but her mother's chroma is too strong, and she's overpowered. Alicia is forced to be reborn as an entirely new person within the painting. We see her new parents holding the now reborn Alicia with none of her memories intact, as they decide on a name for their new baby. Mael. That's right, I lied to you. And the game did too. This entire time, we haven't been playing through the classic RPG party kills an evil god and saves the world. The continent that we explore in Clair Obscur exists within one of many paintings that are in the real world. For reference, think like the painted worlds from Dark Souls. All these paintings reside in a real-world reflection of the manor that we visited throughout the game. The Descendre family are known as painters. Renoir is the father, Aline is the mother, Verso is the son, Clea is the older daughter, and Alicia is the younger daughter. A fire broke out in the manor, seemingly started by a faction known as the Writers. We know that they're at war with the painters, but we don't know anything else about them. In this fire, Verso died in his attempt to save Alicia, who was in turn brutally injured and permanently scarred, leaving her without a voice. The canvas that holds the world we've explored is the last painting that Verso ever created, and a little piece of his soul is still alive within it. Esquier is a doll that Verso had in real life. Monoko and Noko are the names of his dogs, all of which you can see when you explore the manor in the fake-out epilogue, meaning that they were painted by the original Verso alongside this canvas. Renoir wants to destroy the canvas so that they can move on as a family, but Aline can't let him destroy what remains of her son. The Renoir we killed and the Verso that we played as are painted copies of the original, made by Aline out of grief following the real Verso's death when she first entered the painting. Mael has been having nightmares throughout the game, seeing a broken, sinister-looking version of Alicia. She even confronted this copy in person outside of the manor in Old Lumière. This is a reflection of her, and it was also created by Aline when she entered the painting, a distorted, cruel reflection of the blame that she attributes her daughter with when it comes to Verso's death. The curator and the paintress are how the real Renoir and Aline manifest when they're inside the painting. When you cause the paintress to gommage, all you really did was kick Aline out of the canvas into the real world. The paintress's countdown wasn't her broadcasting a conscious decision to gommage people at a certain age. It's a warning. Her power to keep her husband at bay wanes with each year, so the longer those two stay in the canvas, the less people she can protect, meaning the monolith years are intended to let the people know how long she can continue protecting them. Now that Mael, or Alicia, has her memories back, she also regains her abilities as a paintress. She uses these powers to bring the party back to life so that they can plan on how to stop Renoir from destroying the entire canvas now that her mother, the paintress, isn't able to stop him. They travel around the continent, absorbing the chroma trapped within the dead expeditioners who were killed by either Renoir or the Nevrons. This chroma is used as fuel, so they can become strong enough to take on Renoir, expel him from the canvas, and bring back the other residents of Lumière who were gommaged following the defeat of the paintress. With the souls of all the dead expeditioners, you raid Lumière. Your army repels the Nevrons that Renoir created in order to give your group an opening. And through a harsh gauntlet of tough enemies, in the heart of Lumière, you finally meet Renoir face to face. The real one this time. As the battle for the fate of the canvas rages on, he summons the 3 Axons to aid him, and as they all gang up on you, it looks like all is lost for a moment. That is, until Aline re-enters the canvas and takes control of the giant paintress she used to turn the monolith clock. She uses this titan to hold off the Axons, giving the expedition a fair shot at Renoir. It's been well established at this point that the longer a painter stays within a canvas, the more their powers wane, and if they stay long enough, it can be fatal. Aline is nearing that point, which is why Renoir wanted to destroy the canvas, to take and keep her out of it so she won't lose herself. Seeing this, Renoir lashes out, begging Aline to leave the canvas, begging his daughter to just listen to him. He only wants to do what's right for them all in the end, to keep them safe. But Maëlle isn't having it, and neither is Aline. Sacrificing this world isn't gonna happen under their watch. The people are far too real and precious, especially Alicia, who lived a whole life as Maëlle. To her, the people of Lumière are just as much family as the Descendres. So there's no chance she'll let them die for her father's thinly veiled grieving process. Resolute and as powerful as ever, the expedition cuts down Renoir, expelling him from the painting once and for all. Upon his defeat, Renoir and Maëlle argue further. They've both lost so much, they just want to be a family again. But they're going about healing in totally different ways. Renoir wants to force Aline and Maëlle to come to reality and deal with their grief as soon as possible, whereas Maëlle and Aline just need time to be able to face that reality. Though Aline took too much time and ignored the problem for far too long, nearly losing herself to her feelings of grief. They reach a sort of understanding, and Maëlle convinces Renoir to allow her to stay in the painting for now. But with the caveat that once she's worked through what she needs to, she'll leave the painting. It's not exactly clear what his intentions are, but he'll most likely destroy the canvas after she leaves, so she can begin the healing process. Ultimately, this was never a story of good versus evil. The twist at the end changes it from a beautifully symbolic yet pretty standard affair to a tragic tale of how families deal and nearly lose themselves to grief. And with this lens, once you look back on the game, every aspect of it deals with familial loss and the grief that comes with it. The beginning scene in Lumière shows how different people deal with the gommage, how they rationalize such a thing, and the long-term effects of families being torn apart. The NPCs attending the celebration prior all have their own ways of managing the intense emotions that the gommage brings. Some try to deny that it'll happen to them. Some are just angry at the world and all that inhabit it. Some accept their fate and gracefully fade away, only for it to become too real and for them to panic at the end. All of these are very real, very powerful ways that people deal with grief, and you'll find this theme of familial loss within the stories of every character, particularly the playable characters among the expedition. In my opinion, this theme manifests itself in its most powerful form in Ciel's story. If you max out her relationship level, she'll open up to you about her past relationship. She originally thought that her and her husband would have plenty of time together, but he passed away years before their gommage. They were supposed to have years and years more together, but fate didn't let them have their happy ending. In a moment, totally overcome with grief, Ciel leapt from Lumière's pier and fell into the ocean, fully intent on drowning to avoid the empty void that her husband's death left. She didn't know it at the time, but she was pregnant with her husband's baby, and her attempt at drowning resulted in her losing the pregnancy. This only compounded the grief that she had to live with when she washed back up on the pier, as she lost what little could have been left from her husband. In some of the earlier bonding scenes, she shows you that she has an aversion to water. The scars that moment of weakness left on her run deep. And it's only through opening up to Verso, being vulnerable, that she's able to reclaim the memory and triumph over her trauma and start swimming again. I also like the little detail that when they first met, Esquier refers to Ciel as his terrible swimmer friend. And after she reveals to Verso that she tried to drown herself, Esquier reveals that he was actually the one who helped her by bringing her back to Lumière. It just goes to show that he really is a being made to help those out with bad thoughts, as Verso described him. This is likely how the original Verso viewed the doll that Esquier was painted after. The pain that losing a family member causes informs the actions of every character in Clair Obscur. Maëlle was driven to destroy the paintress for Gustave and the rest of the expedition. The entire gommage is the manifestation of Renoir and Aline's conflicting coping mechanisms, and the gommage in and of itself creates an inordinate amount of loss that impacts every life in Lumière. In each character interaction, you can see the self-destructive tendencies that come with improperly dealing with traumatic events, and the peace that can come with accepting reality and properly dealing with the emotions that come with it. After Renoir is expelled from the canvas, it's immediately obvious to Verso that Maëlle doesn't really intend to leave. She wants to stay here until she dies, to keep the citizens safe from her father. When he left, Renoir created an opening to the heart of the canvas. And so, understanding that as long as the canvas exists, Maëlle will never be safe, Verso enters the heart, and Maëlle follows. Within this heart, the two of them see the last piece of the original Verso's soul. Small and frail, it endlessly paints to keep the canvas and its inhabitants alive. Our painted Verso tries to convince him to stop painting and to let the canvas wither away. Given that her powers aren't as strong as her mother's, Maëlle has been in the canvas for far too long, and she won't have much longer to live if she stays. Before he could follow through with his plan, Maëlle arrives and stops Verso. Convinced that they can't let the people of the canvas die just for her, they try to convince one another to step aside, but they soon arrive at a stalemate, and both draw their weapons, leaving the player to decide what happens with the canvas. Every member of the Desandre family is grieving in their own self-destructive way. Aline wants to wither away, immersed in Verso's world, pretending he's still alive. Renoir is angry and takes it out by forcing his family to grieve his way. Clea feigns indifference as she shoulders the family's responsibility to the war in the outside world, and Alicia makes the same decision as her mother. Whether you choose her ending or not, Maëlle fully intends to sacrifice herself to keep the citizens of the canvas safe from her father, and she does exactly that in her ending. Verso's ending forces her out of the canvas in time for it to be destroyed, allowing her family a chance to finally heal, but at the price of a world full of unique races, cultures, and individuals who all have to die to help this family move forward. I personally chose Maëlle's ending, and let me tell you why. This is a summary of my points from an argument I had with my friend Matt after I chose Maëlle's ending, and he told me he chose Verso's. He's on YouTube at Radis Rock. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. When it comes down to it, and Maëlle stands off against Verso, they're both trying to kill themselves so that they no longer have to bear the weight of grief in one way or another. Maëlle feels responsible for the real Verso's death, and this painted Verso has had to live for far too long, with the knowledge that while it's all he exists to do, he can never satisfy the void that the original's death left. He only exists as a reflection of Aline's idealized version of her child. He doesn't even know if he can be his own person. Everything he does is simply a reflection of what Verso would have done. Or maybe it isn't. He has no way of knowing if he has the potential to be an individual, and it eats at him every day of his painfully drawn-out existence. The difference here is that Maëlle is doing it in such a way that saves the world that we explored, and the very real people we got to know along the way. Whereas Verso wants to save Maëlle and the family so bad, he'll sacrifice a world to do so. Yes, Verso's ending gives Maëlle the chance to live, so that her and her family can properly process the pain that the real Verso's death caused. And in a vacuum, yes, that would make it the objectively correct choice, but it's not a vacuum, and it's far more complicated than that. Maëlle is scarred and hurt. She can't speak, and her family can't look at her without feeling Verso's death. The cracked, sinister Alicia we see throughout Maëlle's nightmares is a direct reflection of what her own mother thinks of her. What kind of life is there for her on the outside world to return to? That's not even to mention that while the painting may only be a reflection of the real world, the lives inside are every bit as real and valuable. and the game goes through great length to show you just that through its whole runtime. That's what's at stake. That's what Verso is throwing away so that he can die and Mael can heal. Throughout the game, Verso is so incredibly selfish and manipulative. He clearly waited for Gustave to die before stepping in so that even if she got her memories back, Mael wouldn't hesitate to kill the Paintress. Speaking of the Paintress, while they were battling her, he reveals that he had Esquia's rock Sori allowing him to fly the entire time, hiding it from the party until it was absolutely necessary. He didn't tell them he was Renoir's son until he could no longer hide it. He knew killing the Paintress would result in Renoir killing everybody, but he never said a word. Time and time again, Verso breaks your trust and the trust of the party. He's a likable and well-written character, but given all this and his intent to destroy the canvas for such selfish reasons, he's a bad person, and that makes it much harder to side with him when he wants to destroy the world. Let me backtrack a little bit. I really don't think that either choice is correct, but you can definitely tell where the writers wanted you to go. The themes that they've explored deal heavily with grieving, and how if you avoid dealing with grief head-on, it can eat you alive and lead to your own destruction. So when Mael's ending involves destroying herself to avoid returning to the real world and dealing properly with her emotions, and Verso's ending involves sending her back and forcing her to face reality, you definitely get the feeling that they want you to go with Verso's ending, because, yeah, that's the healthy decision for Mael. And yes, for Mael, and for the lessons that the game wants you to take away, that's the right move. But to me, the price of that emotional progress is just too steep to be a concrete good. Don't get me wrong, when you isolate just Mael, Verso's ending is a happy ending. I don't think she gets a happy ending if you side with her, but the citizens will. As creators who can rule and control entire worlds with very sentient, very real people, you have a responsibility to those people, like a parent would to a child. And destroying an entire world with unique races and civilizations like their playthings just so that a family can better process grief just isn't right. It's not only selfish, it's playing God. It's treating these humans like playthings to be thrown away as you please. However, the success of Mael's ending hinges very heavily on one thing, and that's Renoir's reaction once she passes away. You could argue that Renoir will just destroy the canvas once she's gone, making her ending an unimaginably selfish cruelty. It would mean that she brings the citizens back to life, giving them false hope just for them to die again once she passes away. If Renoir tried to destroy the canvas over Verso's death, there's no telling what he'll do if it takes Mael. And who knows what it'll do to Eline? She may even follow in her daughter's footsteps, given what she did when Verso died. Or maybe Renoir will have learned to respect her wishes, and will leave her alone, since her last act was protecting the canvas. While he definitely seems to lean towards the former, it's not 100% clear what he would do in the event that Mael dies in the painting. We could go back and forth like this forever. Each ending has strong pros and strong cons, and whether Mael's ending has a positive outcome hinges on an external factor that we just don't know. I could be equally convinced that he'll respect Mael's wishes after her death, leaving the painting she sacrificed her life to save alone, and that he would destroy it for taking Mael and nearly his wife. That's why this is such a powerful ending. It isn't cut and dry, it isn't good and bad. There's no right answer. Just two profoundly damaged family members fighting to sacrifice themselves for the other. The game clearly wants you to choose Verso in the name of emotional progress and healing, but to me, the price of an entire world is just too steep. Yes, in Mael's ending, she'll die, and Verso remains miserable, but the innocent citizens and the others all get to live. And as a creator, you have a responsibility to these people. Sure, they're in a painting, but their lives are no less real than the world that made them. You don't get to end their existence just so that you can move on with the death of a family member. That is profoundly selfish. And yet, on the other hand, sacrificing herself within the painting that's already been destroyed and may not have more than a few years left is also self-destructive and antithetical to the conclusion that the writers would like you to draw. I chose Mael's ending, and at the time, I thought it was the clear right answer, but the longer I sat on it, the more I realized I don't know. And if I had to choose again, I'm really not sure who I'd side with, but both endings have their pros and cons. I really hope I've laid out for you just how special Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is. Literally everything about this game spoke to me on such a deep level, and when it comes to the discussion around the game, I love seeing everyone's different takes on the ending and on the characters. I'd love to discuss with the comments with anyone who's played the game, so please, if you happen to disagree with my stance on the ending, leave a comment or join my Discord and let me know so we can discuss. And if you don't disagree, you can still leave a comment and tell me that I'm smart and right about everything. I'm so glad that I had the chance to experience this game, and I truly hope that if you haven't, I've convinced you to do so. So, it's been a while. You could probably tell by my voice, but I'm definitely super sick today, which is the reason I finally had the chance to finish editing this video, and yeah, there's a few things I wanted to talk about. First of all, this is the very first video that I've uploaded on YouTube since March 15th of this year. Right now, as I'm finishing up editing this, it is Friday, September 26th. So, now I know I promised a schedule and a couple of videos specifically. The script for the Vegeta video is done. I just have to record and edit that. And I'm working on the rest of the series that I had promised. Something that I struggled a lot with was motivation, because making these videos is a lot of work, and so to release one for it to get like 90 views personally gave me like a bit of pause with how much of my time I was spending on that versus other things. And then I ended up getting a full-time job, and that just kind of all spiraled into a whole lot of time of me not working on YouTube. That being said, making YouTube videos has always been one of my favorite things to do, just for the love of the game, really. So I'm never not going to do that, and I'm going to upload more often. I'm trying to switch around my process, which will both make the videos a little bit better, I think, and also make it a little easier to edit on my end. What I'm effectively trying to do is hack into my mind and force myself to make videos more often. That being said, I absolutely loved getting to work on this video. Clair Obscur is one of my favorite games of all time. When I wrote this, it was fresh in my head, but now editing it, looking back on what my first takes were, I absolutely still agree with them, and it has not changed position in my top 3 favorite games of all time list at all. For the record, the top 3 are Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and Clair Obscur Expedition 33. You can figure out which one is in which order. When I was editing the audio for this video, I noticed that when I originally did my like outro recording part, where I just talk about the state of the channel, I had mentioned that one of the main reasons I wasn't on YouTube, why I wasn't making anything, was because I had decided that I wanted to play every single Yakuza slash Like a Dragon game in as fast of a time as I possibly could. Because of that, there was a solid couple of months where all of my free time outside of work, which had just started being full time, was spent dedicated to Yakuza and Like a Dragon. It took me so long to edit the audio to this video, which I did last week, that in the recording I say that I'm still playing Judgement, which I finished in July, on July 10th. That was 3 months ago that I recorded this video. All in all, I just want to apologize for being gone so long, and I promise I will be back more often. You might notice a bit of a bigger change, which is you can see my face now. And why is that, you ask? Because I actually lied to you. I have been working on YouTube, just in a kind of nonsensical, backwards facing way. We haven't decided on a full release date yet. I'm going to shoot for October 1st, but 2nd, 3rd, 4th might have to happen because of editing timelines and all that. But me and a couple of my friends are starting a D&D actual play podcast, and I've spent a lot of time preparing for and planning that. In a couple of days, we're going to play our first session, and I'm going to try and have the episode out as soon after that as possible. Something interesting about this is that it takes place in my homebrew D&D world, Ruined, and we did already play a campaign in Ruined. It kind of came into existence as we played our first campaign. And so there is a lot of history to the world and a lot of sort of political movements that only makes sense if you know the story of our first campaign. For the first few episodes, it's not going to really make a big difference, but I'm working on getting recaps out of that campaign so that you'll be able to get an overarching view of the story so you can kind of understand what all the political stuff is that's going on that was affected by the end of the last campaign. The show is called Keep On Rolling. The channel is out, and there are a couple of videos on there, including an introduction to the lore of my world as it pertains to the very beginning of the previous campaign, and upcoming videos recapping the story of the last campaign. This is something that I'm incredibly excited about, and the reason I started talking about it is because we figured that when we do that, I'm going to show my face, so I figured I might as well show my face on this channel as well, since I'm not going to try and hide one from the other. I want to thank you all so much because I understand that I have been gone for a long time, so anyone who is still here, I really appreciate it, listening to me ramble, watching my videos, and especially watching me ramble on this video, because it is the longest one that I've ever done. It might have been a little too much of an undertaking, which is what killed my motivation. Either way, I'm going to be actively trying to hack into my brain to make sure that I am able to get more videos out, so you can look forward to that. If you have any requests, anything you want me to talk about, anything you want to talk to me about, hit me up in the comments of this video, in our Discord, whatever you want to do. I'm so totally open to talking to you guys. So a couple shout outs I want to give. Firstly to Reedus Rock on YouTube. I mentioned him earlier. We had talked about the ending of Clair Obscur, and he helped me hammer out my perspective. He's also going to be a player in Keep On Rolling, so make sure to check him out. His link will be in the description. And that's about it for me today. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me, and hopefully there'll be more content on the way soon. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today. Peace.